week ago I said, I'm not going to talk about this. A week ago I said, I just don't care. I'm of course referring to the greatest offense to our culture since the last greatest offense to our culture. I'm referring to Maroon 5's Super Bowl performance from last weekend. Now, it's been a week since this great offense occurred, and full disclosure, I don't follow football, so I don't watch the Super Bowl. By and large, I don't watch the Super Bowl performances unless it's a music artist that I'm particularly invested in. I caught U2's performance from several years ago. I caught Prince's performance from a few years ago. I remember catching Paul McCartney's performance, but by and large, I don't bother to watch. Super Bowl Sunday is a time when I try to go to the things that are generally crowded because I know they won't be crowded because everybody's watching the Super Bowl. So on Monday, the day after, I had some conversations with friends who are very much into football, and at some point I would invariably ask them, tell me about the Maroon 5 performance, how was that? And they would all say pretty much the same thing. It was dull, it was lackluster, it was disappointing. Now you can probably tell that I have little or no interest in Maroon 5 as a band. I did once catch a performance of theirs, I think it was the iTunes Music Festival when it was broadcasted, and I remember thinking, well, they're a competent band, they play tight, the lead singer has very good chops, but I'm just not into these songs. And if you're a Maroon 5 fan and you enjoy their music and you're watching this video, then my opinion is more power to you. Enjoy it. Just personally, I find their songs to be dull and uninteresting. I certainly can't knock their success. They've earned a lot of hit singles from what I understand. But as the week went by, I began to see lots of headlines on YouTube and other social media platforms. Headlines about this performance declaring, worst Super Bowl performance ever. Career destroying. I mean, these were really strong headlines that I was reading. And I thought, were they really that bad? Or was this just one of those, what I refer to as dog pile on the rabbit moments?
Dog pile on the rabbit! 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 Dog pile on the rabbit!
There are these times when just certain celebrities or media figures, whatever you want to call them, when they suddenly become a target for the general public and everybody just bashes on them because it's just the thing to do right now. I've seen this time and time again, and I wondered if this was one of those moments. So I went to the NFL's YouTube page where they posted the performance, and I saw this: 114,000 likes, 786,000 dislikes. And I thought, whoa, that's really disproportionate. I then went to the Maroon 5 YouTube page where they had posted the performance, and I saw 32,000 likes, 40,000 dislikes, and this is their YouTube page. So I really began to wonder, wow, how bad could this be? And so I decided to watch the performance, and I didn't watch it on my phone, I didn't watch it on my computer, I watched it on my TV so I could get the whole big screen TV effect. So first off, I was surprised to find out that one of the early songs they played was actually one that I recognized and liked. It was entitled This Love. This was a song I believe was off their first album. And I always enjoyed that song. I thought it was a fun pop song with some rock leanings. I have to admit I'd forgotten about the song, haven't heard it in a while, and I was not aware that it was from Maroon 5, so that was a pleasant surprise. So as I continued to watch this, I found myself thinking, okay, the band, nothing wrong with them. They're playing very tight. There was some criticism that I had read about regarding the lead singer, that his vocals weren't all that stellar. I'll admit there were a few brief moments where he had some rough patches, and I'm just talking brief moments. I attribute this more to nerves than anything else. It's obvious that he was a little bit nervous, but for the most part, he was fine. He was competent. He seemed, like he was doing a good job. And I will add this, in a culture where we are way too accepting of singers, solo artists, what have you, lip syncing to backing tracks in a so-called live performance, at least when you hear these little flutters, these little moments where it's not 100% perfect, at least you know it's really live. And I'd rather hear someone sing live for real and maybe have just a brief moment where they're not 100% than listen to someone lip sync to a backing track that's perfect sounding. I've certainly heard plenty of legendary, iconic music artists whose music I'm deeply invested in have occasional rough moments during a live performance. Maybe they vocally crack or something for just a brief moment, or they don't quite hit the note, or there's a tiny little flub somewhere with the band, but nobody crucifies them for it. I certainly don't think that his vocals were in any way career-destroying, and I was surprised to find out that the lead singer of Maroon 5 actually plays guitar, and he was handling the guitar solo pretty well for the brief time he was playing. I have to admit the whole SpongeBob thing was completely lost on me. From what I understand, it's a reference to some kind of meme that's made the rounds on the internet. It's some kind of an inside joke. Whatever it was lost on me. But at the end of the day, it's irrelevant because I just was trying to concentrate on the performance. The show also featured guest performances by two rappers. One named Scott Travis, who I'm sorry, I don't know anything about him, haven't heard any of his music. The other one, Big Boy, who I am familiar with because I do have 2 Outkast albums in my collection. I also read there was quite a bit of outrage over the fact that the lead singer took his shirt off during the performance. I'm not sure why that's relevant. I listened to Eddie Trunk's commentary on this, and he said that he felt that probably because there's a lot of guys watching the Super Bowl who are gorging on Cheetos and chicken wings and whose bellies stick out, and they're sitting there with their girlfriends, and here's this guy who looks good with his shirt off, and maybe that's why people are upset about this. There's probably some truth to that. I don't know if that's the only reason. I also read that there were some people who felt this was somehow unjust because why is it okay for a man to appear topless in public and not a woman? I have to admit, I agree with that. There is something that is just really dumb. But that's because we've had decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of culture that has told us this, even though there's no real logical reason for that if you look at it objectively and logically. But that's a whole nother topic that I'm not going to get into here. I want to just concentrate on this performance. But those complaints, I think, are completely irrelevant. So I took a step back and I thought, maybe I need to do a little comparison shopping. So I pulled up some recent performances. I watched the following. I watched Lady Gaga's performance. Lady Gaga, a music artist whose music doesn't do a whole lot for me, although I admit she's a very talented performer. I watched Justin Timberlake's performance. Once again, Justin Timberlake, he's one of those artists who I'm not real crazy about his recorded output, his records, but when I watch him live with his band, I find myself thinking, why can't I get a record that sounds like him with his band versus what he actually records? Although I'll admit he's a stellar powerhouse vocalist, and he's a good actor too, by the way. I watched the Coldplay performance. Coldplay is one of those bands I'm kind of medium on. I like some of their songs. My co-host on Music Worth Buying, Robert Kinsler, he's into them way more. And that performance featured Beyonce and Bruno Mars. I watched that one. And I watched Katy Perry. I watched her performance, which also featured Missy Elliott and Lenny Kravitz. Katy Perry, once again, one of those music artists whose music doesn't do a whole lot for me. Missy Elliott, I have to admit, I do like that one song that she did in her performance. I can't think of the title right now, but do like that song an awful lot. And Lenny Kravitz, who is an artist whose music I like actually quite a bit. So I felt like these were kind of fair comparisons to make because these are all musical artists for the most part whose music I'm not that into. Although I'll admit some of them I'm a little bit more into than, say, Maroon 5. Although that's not saying much. So I watched all of these various different Super Bowl performances, and there was something that occurred to me. And I'm going to use Justin Timberlake as the example. Even though I'm not into Justin Timberlake's, his singles, his hits, his records, his recorded output, I have to admit there was an excitement to that performance that I wasn't seeing in the Maroon 5 performance. And the same held true for the Lady Gaga performance. for the Katy Perry performance, for the Coldplay performance. There was a real sense of excitement, but also I had no idea that these had become such a huge spectacle. There was so much grandeur. There was so much visually going on that by comparison, the Coldplay performance felt kind of just rushed, kind of just thrown out there. It was very much like, hey gang, let's put on a show. And once again, bear in mind that aside from the aforementioned Paul McCartney, Prince, and U2 Super Bowl performances, I had not really caught anything recent. And those three performances that I just mentioned, while yeah, there's some light show, there might be a few on-stage effects, by and large, these are traditional music performances where the band, we're going to play, and yeah, we're going to have some light show going on, but we are going to just let the music do the talking. Once again, I was rather taken aback by what a huge spectacle these things have become, and by comparison, I can now see why the Maroon 5 performance feels like a letdown. Now, earlier I mentioned that this Super Bowl performance looked like it was rushed. It looked like it was put together at the last minute, and it's fair to state that that was actually true. They had a lot less time to put this particular show together. And part of that was because for a while the NFL did not have a headliner. And this ties into the controversies that were going on surrounding this particular Super Bowl performance. I think it's time to address those. There were basically two controversies. First, there was the fact that the Super Bowl was in Atlanta. And many felt that since it was in Atlanta, that the NFL should choose someone from Atlanta. And of course, since Atlanta is the hip-hop mecca that it is, that one of Atlanta's own and a hip-hop artist should headline. Truth be told, the NFL did approach a number of hip-hop artists, from what I understand. Many celebrities, including Jay-Z and Rihanna, reportedly boycotted the Super Bowl as a show of solidarity to ex-NFL player Colin Kaepernick and other athletes who kneeled during the national anthem as a symbol of protest against racial injustice. There were petitions circulating from Change.org urging the band to refuse the Super Bowl gig for this reason, stating that Maroon 5 would be on the wrong side of history if they did this show. And after they accepted the gig, there were similar petitions asking that the band's lead singer, along with rapper Travis Scott and Big Boy, to take a knee during the show as a sign of solidarity to Colin Kaepernick. It's my personal assumption that these controversies definitely played a hand in the delayed reaction from Maroon 5 in accepting the gig, and thus meaning that there was less time for preparation for this performance. But I do have to wonder how much these controversies played in the negative reaction to their performance. I know that at least the first petition was circulated through Change.org, and if I were to look at just the YouTube numbers, I would say that Change.org was right. That by not boycotting the Super Bowl, Maroon 5 will be on the wrong side of history. But there is one other interesting and very contradictory wrinkle to all of this. This is according to Billboard magazine. In total, Maroon 5's entire catalog of songs, not just the 6 tracks the act performed on the halftime show, logged a 488% sales gain, up from 4,000 on Saturday to 24,000 on Sunday. And the 6 songs they did play got a 587% boost. Regardless of how you feel about these controversies, regardless of how you feel about the band's actual performance, with all controversies set aside, this is a fascinating dichotomy. I can't explain it personally, but it is intriguing. And if anyone has a theory that they'd like to put forth, please do so in the comments. I'm curious to read what you have to say about it. At the end of the day, I don't think that Maroon 5's performance is anything to be ashamed of. It's a competent performance. But in comparison to the spectacle that halftime shows have now become, the whole thing comes off as just kind of just rushed and last minute, and that's because it was. And given the limited amount of time they had to put the show together, I guess it's about as good as we could expect. Of course, personally, I feel that Maroon Band is just not the most exciting band in the world, and therefore not the right choice to be headlining this kind of a show. But that's just my personal opinion. What are your thoughts? Please leave a comment. It's fine if you disagree with me and you want to argue a point, but please be respectful in the comments. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.